Hi, welcome back to Ocean Pro. So what we're going to do in this video is have a look at the requirements for an RYA training centre that's running the PwC safety course on board a super yacht. I'm going to refer to begin with to this list, which is the RYA training checklist PW for a personal watercraft. And you can see we've highlighted some various items on there. And those are the ones that actually need to be carried on your PwC. The majority of yachts will operate with a safety boat as their safety cover rather than another PwC. If you are operating with your PwC as your safety craft, then you would need to complete the full list, and that's detailed in these requirements just below. So what we'll do, we'll have a look in the bow compartment to what your inspector will be looking for on your PwC inspection. Fire extinguisher, standard, small 1 kilo one will suffice. Floating tow line, high visibility, minimum 6 meters. Well, you can easily go for more than that to make it more usable. Hand bearing compass, well, that's something you can store either in the bow locker or in your front compartment there underneath the handlebars. A kill cord in good condition. We'll have a look at one that isn't in quite such good condition also. This is what you need to check before your inspector comes along, that you're not presenting something that's damaged in any way. Anything like that should be replaced, be it for your PwC or your safety tender. The kill cord in good condition, obviously most of these things are, but they do get weathered with time of being in sunlight. So we've got a secondary one on board. So we also need a small grapnel anchor for our PwC. You may not think you're going to anchor your PwC very often, but it is quite a useful thing. If you're in an emergency, you need to get a guest back to the yacht quickly, you might want to just drop this down to save the PwC drifting away. Small grapnel anchor can obviously line and a bit of chain on the anchor itself. The PwC itself, well, obviously should be in good condition. The inspector is going to check the hull for any damage, cracks, etc. So have a good look around that, make sure it's in good condition. Towing eyes, etc., D-rings should all be in good condition. And then inside the engine bay itself, the inspectors going to want to see that. So we'll remove the seats. Check inside the engine bay that everything is, clean, dry, good connections, etc. It's going to want to see correct operation of the steering nozzle and reverse gate, that it moves up and down, and also if you've got a step fitted, that operates correctly. And what we'll do is we'll run the engine. Well, we've connected the hose up, so we'll run the engine. At the same time, we can do a check of the kill cord to make sure that's working correctly as well. So your inspector is going to want to see your buoyancy aids. Generally, they're going to be the European standard, the CE marked 50 Newton impact resistant buoyancy aids that most yachts have, something like a Joe buoyancy aid on board. It's also permissible to have the US Coast Guard Type 3 PFD standard as well, and there are other standards that you can put to RYA training if you do have those on board. But generally, those are the two standards that are accepted. What you don't want to have is, I'll put a picture of this up into the video now, is something that says this is not a life jacket, only to be used by competition wakeboarders. That's not acceptable for an RYA training centre to use for PwC use. So yeah, also, we've talked about this previously, but if you're in French waters, you've got the life jacket light that's been blanked off, so it's only in manual operation, but that's what's required in French waters. In French waters, we've got our requirement to have at least 2mm neoprene, and this is also an RYA requirement that you offer your guests or have available 2mm neoprene wetsuits or shorts to prevent against internal injuries. Law in French waters, an RYA requirement to have them on board anyway. So So that's a look around our PWC part of the inspection. What we'll do now is have a move down to have a look at our safety craft and the equipment that's required aboard there. So another thing you're required to have for your RYA PWC training centre is 4 times marker buoys visible on all likely teaching conditions. This is probably the preferred option, a pencil buoy like this that stands up. What you do is you put your dive weights in the bottom, about 4 or 5 kilos, and it will stand up nicely. Presents a really sort of professional look to your training centre. We'll put a link down in the description if you want to get hold of these as well. You can have something smaller perhaps, but these deflate to quite a small size anyway, so easily stored on board. So your training centre inspector is going to use this checklist to check your safety craft equipment. That's the RYA training checklist powerboat TCP list. Some of the items on there don't apply to a yacht running the RYA PWC course. They're items for further RYA courses, which things like the powerboat too, so do read that carefully. But let's go through the ones you're required to have. One of the first ones that comes up is you should have some alternative means of propulsion, something like a paddle. Okay, as a minimum you can use that for emergency steering, so make sure you've got some paddles on board. Then we got bucket or baler. Well, why not have both? So we've got our bucket and a baler on board. The tow line, well, we're talking about towing. It's another small craft or PWC, but a floating line, great for that, plenty of it. This is throw line. So you can get the rescue quoit type ones, but I actually prefer this sort of bag type where you can fit it all into the bag. Nice and easy to heave over to someone in the water or someone on the shore with a floating line again. The toolkit, well, that's not specified what's got to be in it, but try and think what's going to be useful on board your craft. We have some things like WD-40, grips, long nose pliers, that sort of thing. Something you might be doing a little running repair until you get back to your home base. TPA or survival bag, yeah, make sure you've got at least one of those on board. Just if you do get somebody who's injured and gets wet, cold, hypothermia can quickly set in. A first aid kit, waterproof. As a minimum, it's going to have these wound dressings in. And the reason behind that is that, you know, we do operate craft, or craft will be operating with propellers. So there, you know, horrible possibility there might be a propeller injury. So inside one of these kits, we've got something like this is ideal. It's a large pad with strapping on it. It's a trauma dressing, 2 of those, 2 large ones, 2 medium ones, plus some triangular bandage. And that's the minimum that's required for an RYA safety craft, enough to get somebody back to a safe point where they can be treated properly. You may have more on board, that's fine, but that's the minimum you need to have. The stress flares requirement is to have 2 handheld. Here we've got a pack of 3, but its minimum is 2, plus 2 smoke. So 2 pinpoint red and 2 smoke flares. Sharp knife. The reason behind that is you may need to cut away lines from your PWC, but there's a sharp knife, serrated one. Fire extinguisher. As previously mentioned, minimum of a kilo one. Dry powder is the usual type. VHF, fixed or handheld, can be on board, and you should have your radio procedure emergency card over there on the console as well. We can have a look at giving you your read off Mayday procedure. Either anchor chain and warp. So I was stored in this little compartment, but ideally something like a Danforth anchor is much better than the grapnel type. Sufficient length of chain on there for the area of operation. Make sure it's a sufficient weight as well. That's detailed on the training checklist, what you're required to have in terms of weight and length of line. Spare keel cord, again, as mentioned previously, should be in good condition. Check that it's got the inner core to it as well. If you are going to replace your keel cords, try to go for the original equipment manufacturer, the OEM type. So if you've got a Yamaha keel cord, go direct to Yamaha to get that keel cord. But yeah, you should have a spare one on board. And you may have a chart plotter, but as a minimum, a laminated chart of the area you're operating in. Obviously, as a yacht centre, you're going to be moving from place to place, so you need to risk assessed as part of your procedure anyway, but something to refer to for your tender driver to get back to you safely. Also an efficient sound signal, so it could be any of the horn types or a gas operated type one. Our preferred one is the trump horn, which you just blow in the side there, get a nice 100 decibel ring from it. Come over to the craft itself. So we need to make sure that the if it's an outboard engine or a jet drive, that it all functions correctly, and an RYA training safety boat must have a kill cord, so that must function correctly as well. So we'll trim the engine down now. You may be doing this in a tender garage or even on the hard. That's permissible. You know, today we're in the water, so that's easy. So that just a general function of the outboard in general. So there's no problem with the steering. There's no leaks if it's a hydraulic steering system. That it travels easily from side to side. That it's securely mounted at the back on its transom. If it's an outboard, and again, general things like this, if it's a jet drive as well, that it's all in good serviced condition. We want to make sure that the engine doesn't start in gear, so here we've got the engine in gear position, and it's not going to start. Yeah, into reverse as well, not going to start, so that needs to be checked as well. Whichever system you've got, shouldn't start in gear. We'll do a quick check start now of the engine and the cooling system, and then check the kill cord for function as well. Engine's running correctly. We'll just check the kill cord functions as well. So in this part of the video, we're going to look at the operating procedures and paperwork that go alongside your RYA PwC training centre. And before you get to your inspection day, it's good to become familiar and update yourself on any info and updates from the RYA training support site. Each training centre should have access to this. There's a specific login. Do contact RYA training if you haven't got that. And within that training support site, it will give you a lot of information, key roles at the centre being one of them, how you apply, different criteria for your operating area, and different information about practical centres running different types of courses. Some of it won't be, or quite a lot of it won't be applicable to a super yacht running the PwC safety course on board, because it covers all types of RYA centres running everything from yachtmaster courses down to courses on the inland waterways. But there are specific sections that you should be familiar with. So the training support site lists the principal's undertakings. Sometimes the role of the principal causes a little bit of confusion. Now, the principal themselves, they don't have to be a qualified instructor, but they do have to have sufficient authority within the centre to make sure everything's done properly and the recognition guidance notes and the operating procedures are followed correctly. If they're not a qualified instructor, then they do need to appoint a chief instructor, and we'll talk about that role in a moment. Now, you'll receive this front page of your inspection report form by email before your inspection date, so you should check all the details are correct, i.e. your contact details, who the principal is, their contact number and email, etc. Some of it is written for any type of RYA centre, so you won't have a primary water base to list there. As you can see, the centre is recognised for a super yacht, so the primary water base isn't listed there. So on the inspection report form, the chief instructor must be listed. They need to be a qualified RYA PwC instructor, and as the name suggests, they've got day-to-day responsibility for running the training or making sure the training's being run correctly by other instructors, for mentoring junior instructors, for making sure that they have the correct equipment and all things are running correctly and safely at the training centre. So the first page of the inspection report form, you'll list the centre name and the date the inspection takes place, and the chief instructor along with their RYA membership number is listed here, and the inspector themselves will want to see the instructor's qualifications, so this white boxes at the end are left for the inspector to tick off once they've seen them, and their first aid qualifications. Other instructors are listed here also. So here's an example of a personal watercraft instructor qualification. You can see it has a space for a photo. It's got the RYA reference number, that's the person's RYA membership number generally, and the date of expiry. Now the personal watercraft instructor certificates are valid for 5 years, and they can be revalidated by listing a minimum of 30 hours of tuition at an RYA training centre. Now there is a procedure to go through if that hasn't taken place. We can do a revalidation of a one-day reassessment, but please don't let them go over 2 years, because then they become invalid. Make sure also before that the inspector gets there that these certificates have been signed by the holder. So the inspector is also going to want to see the instructor's first aid certificates, and they should have been issued within the last 5 years. Now generally, or for a lot of people, that's going to be the elementary first aid certificate, which may be refreshed or renewed up to 5 years. But do be aware that the current system for renewing the basic safety training doesn't include a refresher for first aid. So make sure there's some sort of evidence of a refresher or renewal has taken place. That could be onboard training with a recognised provider or another first aid certificate. Following on from what we're just talking about, make sure there's a system to make sure that staff qualifications, instructor for qualifications and the like are kept in date. That may be some sort of calendar system with alerts when they're coming up for renewal. Your management company may be involved in this as well, sending you alerts when certain crew members need their qualifications updating. Now the next page of the inspection report form lists the training fleet. So the section we're going to be interested in is the one for powerboat and personal watercraft, and the safety fleet as well. So here we've got an example. We've got a tender listed as the safety craft with its length overall, etc., and the PWCs that the centre has also listed. Now the following page of the inspection report form has got all the criteria that the inspector is going to be looking for in the centre. In the blue column on the right here, you can see there's a space where it can be filled in either A, B, C, or none. Now A is something that needs to be rectified before any training can take place. B needs to be rectified in a minimum of 3 months, and C needs to be rectified before the next training centre inspection, i.e. the next year's inspection. If there's none, then that speaks for itself. Now the first section there, you can see that there's a section about safety. First of all, that the operating procedures are robust and fit for purpose and reflect how the centre operates. So that's quite general, but just check through your procedures to make sure that there's nothing there that stands out as, no, we definitely don't do this or that. So just check that the procedures are actually what you do in your training centre. There should also be a system to making sure that anybody involved in the centre, that's instructors and supervisors, have read and understood these procedures. And usually that's something like this, a signing sheet where the instructor is listed, their first aid certificate and personal watercraft qualifications are listed, and a section there, as you can see, where they've signed to say they've read and understood. There's also a section for when they've been familiarised with the training centre and the equipment in this case. Now, one of the things the centre should have is an action plan, an emergency action plan relating to the PWC activity. Now, on board a yacht, you'll have multiple emergency action plans for abandonment or fire or man overboard. But what we're looking for here is something specific relating to if an incident occurs whilst you're involved in PWC or training or supervision. And really it's just a simple flow chart here of what to do if there's been an incident or accident. Follow the procedure, make sure everybody's okay, administer any first aid, and generally it's going to be contact the bridge for further instructions. So that should be in place, ideally kept laminated and kept on the safety craft so it's ready to hand. A yacht training centre is different to any other type of RYA training centre where you don't have a fixed operating base but move from anchorage to anchorage to conduct your PWC training and supervision days. So really what we need to do is almost what's often called a permit to jet ski, permit to work idea, where you actually go ahead and make a little mini risk assessment for the area you're operating in for that day. And as the training support site outlines, it should be clearly identify the training area, any hazards. Ideally, it should be free of hazards, but if there are any, it should be listed and identified. And basically, there's a record there that you've carried out your best practice to make sure you've given your trainees and your guests a good area to operate in. So here's an example of an operating area risk assessment form. The dates in the corner. Any local bylaws are listed, hazards, where the location is, and really it's a sketch plan that identifies where the no-go areas are, where the speed limits are, and things to be aware of. Something you can use to brief your guests before they go for the day's PWCing as well, to show them the area they should be operating in. Here's another example. Again, same sort of criteria, different operating area. So there should also be a record of staff training, and it's nice if this is all in one place in terms of the PWC centre. So you may have other records for familiarisation with your safety craft and your procedures for launching, etc. But you can reference those in one place. That's great because that makes it nice and easy for the inspector to see you're following correct procedures. And you can see there's launching and recovery, procedures for choosing and documenting the PWC operating area. Some general things here about first aid kits. Now, most yachts have multiple first aid kits, but on board, as we mentioned in the earlier part of the video, that you should have a first aid kit that carries wound dressings, etc., for immediate, emergencies. This type of crash pack's a brilliant idea because it's sealed up. You can have multiple ones of those around in your tenders and safety craft. And on board your yacht, you should have your first aid locations clearly marked, as generally most yachts will do as a matter of course. And you should be able to contact the emergency services as well. That's for a yacht centre. That shouldn't be any problem with the communications you've got on board. And as we mentioned previously in the earlier part of the video, then your safety craft needs to have a VHF on board. You can have a backup of a UHF, but it must have a VHF on board, either fixed or handheld. So you should have some sort of system, so you're recording maintenance and daily, or rather weekly or monthly checks on your boats and equipment. So something that's making sure you're keeping on top of that. So there should be a system to make sure you're monitoring how many water users are out on the PWCs at any time. This can be a call to the bridge and noted by the person on watch in the bridge at the time, or it could be a whiteboard style setup back at the beach club with an in-out type system. Whatever's going to work and whatever is practical, but this should be listed in your procedures how this is going to be done. We like to see that you've got a clear place for guests and trainees to depart from, and there's a procedure there to make sure it's safe to get people on and off PWCs. The ideal solution would be the floating type docks, because that's easy for to board from. It's nice and low, close to the water. So that sort of stuff. That's not a requirement that you have one of those, but whatever you have should be listed and be easily explained to your training centre inspector. Now, we mentioned these earlier on in the video. Definitely you've got to have good quality kill cords fitted to all your safety craft and PWCs. Must be fully functioning, used at all times when underway. So make sure your kill cords are in good condition. We did mention this earlier on, but there's some further examples of ones that we wouldn't accept as training centre inspectors. There you go. There's one that's been UV damaged, and you can see it's been broken away. You can see that a kill cord should have an inner core. You can see that where the plastic is broken there's a white inner core. There's one next to it there which doesn't have a white inner core, which is solid plastic. That type shouldn't be used because with the UV damage, that's going to easily break and have no strength at all. Yeah, replace them for the amount that costs. That's a very simple fix, just to replace it rather than do anything else. So you've got to maintain the appropriate student instructor ratio. and that's one instructor can supervise up to 3 machines and 6 students. Now, it may be that your training centre setup is never going to work like that you perhaps do one-to-one tuition with your guests, but that's the maximum you could do, provided you've got the correct equipment. The inspector is going to want to see they've got some good quality training and visual aids, that as a minimum a whiteboard, but ideally a bit more than that, perhaps some plastic model boats and model jet skis, some laminates of how the PwC works, anything you think is going to aid your tuition, sort of thing you learn when you do the PwC instructor course, to use visual aids. So your course program should clearly show that the structure of the course, how you're going to deliver it, and make sure that it meets the minimal instructional time, which is 1 hour for the PwC safety course. And it should cover all the things that are listed in the RYA publication, that the things like the layout of the PwC, the essential safety information, the rules of the road as related to a PwC user. We're not talking about officer of the watch level, we're just talking about simple explanation of the rules that will keep them safe, and they should be able to demonstrate a practical application of this, and also be able to handle the machine correctly and board it and start the engine, control it at slow speed and at planing speed. They should be able to reboard the PwC and then communicate effectively with your overseeing safety craft. So you should have a clear lesson plan in your PwC operating procedures that shows how this is going to be achieved, the location, the equipment needed, and any specific notes for each RYA centre must have an equality policy, and some RYA guidance on training guidance notice 1315, which you can find on the training support site. You should have a child protection policy and vulnerable persons protection policy, good instructors good practice guide in place on board as an RYA training centre. So you can find these details on the RYA training support site, or guidance for this. Now you should have a system of accident reporting. Now most yachts will have this in place as part of their safety management, that they've got incident and accident reporting. So you do not need to reinvent that, but you do, as a minimum, need to make a reference to that so that your training centre inspector can clearly see that that's in place and how this would be done. You can have, and lots of yachts will also have, a quick system to record any details of the incident and accident as a paper-based immediate response to it, so they can then upload it to their management system at a later time. So you need to be able to identify any relevant medical information and have a declaration of fitness for your students. And this can be as simple as just a signing sheet where they have signed to say that they understand that there's a physical activity and they consider themselves physically fit and able to do this. You keep a record of any certificates that are issued and where they were issued. There's a certificate number on each PWS, which is the Personal Watercraft Safety Certificates. So that's something your training inspector needs to see that you're recording. So if you have any questions regarding producing your operating procedures, we can help you with that. We offer a consultation service, so I'll put a link to that and to equipment and instructor training that we provide at our centre in Beaulieu in France, and also on board. So there'll be some links below in the description. So I hope you found that useful. We'll put a link to the information in the comments below. And please subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks very much.